Tal Kadosh, Boker Or. In this week's parasha, there's something incredible that we see. Yaakov Avinu comes and he bows down to his brother 7 times. And you realize that also all his children bowed down to them as well. He first placed the Shefachot and their children, the maidservants and their children, so Bilhan, Zilpah and the children, then Leah and her children, and then Rachel and Yosef, and they all bowed down to Esav. The Balaturin comes at the end of the parasha and he says the fact that he bowed down 7 times, that gave 7 kings to Esav. And that's why the end of this week's parasha is the 7 kings that he bowed down to Esav. Okay, that's the number 1. But something very, very interesting. Yeah, something very interesting. What was interesting? Do we realize that what happens is that there is a pasuk in Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther, it says, "Vayhi be'omram elav ke'omram elav yom vayom be'omram ke'omram." There's a kriyuktiv. Kriyuktiv means that in the Torah it's written, in the Megillah it's written one way, and we read it another way. So there's a bet and then a kaf. So one of them is written and one of them is read. There, the majority of people, we actually read both. Usually, whatever is the one that we read. The one that's written, we ignore. But here, we read both. We do both. The question is why? So the Minchat Shai comes and he says an incredible dialogue that happened between Mordechai and Haman. Haman Arasha comes to Mordechai as Sadiq and he tells him, who do you think you are? Are you greater than Yaakov Avinu, your grandfather? Your great-great-great-great-grandfather? So he says, why? It's very simple. Yaakov Avinu bowed down to my great-great-grandfather, Esav, 7 times. So Mordechai Tzaddik comes, and it's be'omram ke'omram. What is bet and kaf? Kaf bet? 22. Kaf is 20, bet is 2. 22. How many times did they bow down to Esav? 22. Why? There were 11 children. 11 children. And there were 4 wives. 4 wives, right? Rachel, Leah, Zilpah, Bilha, the 2 maidservants and the 2 wives, Rachel and Leah. 11 children. That's 15. And 7 of Yaakov, that he bowed down 7 times, is 22. So therefore, he was telling him, look, they bowed down, everybody bowed down to him. If everybody bowed down to Esav, you should also bow down to Esav. What does Mordechai answer him? Mordechai answers Haman, you forgot a very important point. You know what the important point is? Who didn't bow down? Binyamin. Binyamin was in the stomach of Rachel. Rachel died on the path. She was pregnant of Binyamin. His great-grandfather did not bow down to Esav. And therefore, I'm not going to bow down to you either. And that's why there's the kafbet, the 22, because there were 22 bows, but I wasn't included. Because I come from Binyamin. Right? Binyamin ish, right? Yemini. He comes from the tribe of Binyamin Tzaddik. And therefore, he did not bow down. When we're coming here, there's something very interesting. There, Rashi brings down, what was the order of the people that he placed? He placed the maidservants, the children, Leah and her children, and Rachel and Yosef. We know afterwards that Yosef went in front of Rachel in order to cover up his mother, so that way Esav would not look at the beauty of his mother. But that was the order. And they actually say, Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. What does that mean, Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv? The question that we ask is, who's the most important? The first or the last? The question is, when we come and we say, last but not least. So in English, it's last, but he's not least. In Hebrew, they say, Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv, he's precious. It's not that you're saying that he's not least. You're saying he's even precious. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying just to console the person? That, Kilu, listen, at the end of the day, you're last. So we don't want to give you a bad feeling. So you know what? We're going to say that you're even precious. Or really bemet, that is true. So we have to understand bemet. Right? So for example, you're going to bring down a whole bunch of people in the pasuk. Do you go in chronological order? Do you go according to who's the smartest, who's the oldest, who's the... So what's going on over here? So here when Rashi comes and he says that the Seder is Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv, right? So are we coming with saying that really Be'emet, is that correct or not? Right? Because we know that usually the Rishon is Chashuv Yoter, meaning the first one is the most Chashuv. A Kohen is going to be Chashuv. Because he comes from the Kohanim. So he starts first. You're not going to tell him, listen, the last one is always the most Chashuv, so start last. So what's going on then? Okay? So that's the question. So he comes and he says like this. Rashi says, "Bepuel seder acharon yeh basof," and the reason why is he says the Radak because it was according to sakana, meaning the closer that they were to Esav, the more dangerous it was. So therefore, if he's going to put now Rachel and Yosef at the beginning, it's more dangerous for them. So it's better to Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. That's why you have to make them precious to put them last. So even if Esav does come and he kills somebody, but they're the last ones that are going to be killed, because they're already at the end of the line. Okay, and therefore in this one, maybe you're going to say, yeah, that maybe the more chashuv is the more the last. That you could actually say, right? But do you always say that or not? Okay, so some of the Achronim actually say that in this case, the more that a person is going to be nirdaf and pachot chaviv, right? Yes, there's going to be more of a kilu, the thing of that, you want to come, and so he wanted to put them less chashuv there in order that they should be saved more, right? And Yaakov and Rachel and Yosef, they're going to be more chaviv, so they're in a bigger sakana. So therefore he did it in this order. But okay, but let's try to find out. So it says like this, the Midrash says, Vayasem teshafchot vet yaldehen rishona, Hada amra, Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. So it's a Midrash. The Midrash says this is a klal, and that's also the Psikta Zuktarta. Okay, Lamanu Acharon Acharon Chaviv Yoter. So from these Midrashim we actually learn that the klal of Acharon Acharon Chaviv is not just tam that it comes from Rashi, right? It's a Midrash. The Midrash says there's such a concept that the last ones are precious. So now we have to actually come and say that the Torah, why did it have to come and say Pamaim again? Right? With again by Leah and your children, again you said the same thing. And then again, you say it by Rachel and Yosef. So why do we have to keep on saying again the same thing? Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. Why are we saying it again and again? So the Barbenel comes and he says, is because Yaakov was not afraid, right, of Esav, because he knew that he had good deeds and everything, and therefore he already knew that nothing was going to happen to him, right? And therefore he didn't even try to run away. He knew it was fine. That's fine. And therefore he says, so then what's the pshat in Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv? He says, even if Yaakov Avinu was afraid, he still prayed to Hashem, obviously. But he said at the end, and he divided the camp into two and everything that you want, but he still put it in a way that is proper because of Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. Not because of the technical, maybe they're going to be damaged or not. But it's not, even if they're not going to be damaged, there's a technical issue. This is the way that it's supposed to be. Meaning, forget about dangers. This is the way that it's supposed to be. First one, second one, third one, like that. Another mekor is the Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni comes and it says, "Vayishalu mitzayim kele chesef uchle zahav usmalot." They came and they collected from Mitzrayim kele chesef, silver, gold, clothing. So here it says, you see from here, the ksut was chaviva lehen yoter mina kesef mina zahav. The clothing was chaviv to them even more than kesef and zahav. Why? Acharon, Acharon, chaviv. Meaning the fact that you first brought down silver, then gold, then clothing, the clothing was the last one mentioned. So the clothing was more important than even silver and gold. Even silver and gold. That's when they were coming out of those things. So usually we would say, no, first you tell me the gold, which is most expensive, then the silver, then the clothing. It doesn't say that. So therefore we have to understand, so then what's going on then? Rav Shimshon Hirsch says, another place also, Vayavo Yitro Chotem Moshe, Uvanav Yishtol Moshe. Comes the father-in-law of Moshe, the children, and his wife. He says, why does it start with the choten and then the wife, right? So he says, because Acharon, Acharon, Chavi. It was more important for him to see his wife. So he didn't say that the wife was coming. He said first the father-in-law was coming, then the children and the wife. So he says, again, you see it. Another place, the Talmid Marshal comes and he says, when we see the 5 kings of Midian, it says, Evi rekem tzur chur vereva. it says over there, Tsur was written the third one. Now we know that Kozbi was the daughter of Tsur. Kozbi was a princess, and she went and she caused the prince of the tribe of Shimon to sin with her. And then they had to come, and Pinchas came and he killed, right, the prince of the tribe of Shimon. So he comes and he says, at the beginning, Be'emet, he would have been the first one. But since he was so degraded because he sent out his daughter to be a prostitute, so therefore he was brought down to level number 3. Okay, and therefore they come and they say that afterwards he lost his chashivut. But really, Be'emet, he should have been actually really Be'emet the last one, right? Or the first one. But for sure not the... So then the question is, okay, fine. So what Be'emet then is the best? Is it the first or is it the last? This is what we have to understand. To do with Aliyot La Torah, the Gemara says that we go according to Chashivut HaOlim. The first one is the Chashuv Yoter, and then the second, and then the third. But in order that they shouldn't have fights, we always say that the Kohen should be first. And therefore we do the Mitzvah V'Kidashto, and then afterwards the Levi, and afterwards the Shlishi, the Yisrael, and that's the way that continues going. But it is brought down in a lot of the Rishonim that there's a Ma'ala in the last Aliyah, in the Mashlim. Some people think about the Shishi, it's only because of Pia Kabbalah. But really, Be'emet, the Mashlim is Be'emet the most important Aliyah, because Acharon, Chaviv. And that's what's brought down in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, Na'agu shegadol hatzibur hu ha'mesayem ha'parasha. He's the one that finishes off the parasha. And that's also brought down the Khatam Sofer, that his rabbi, Rabbi Natan Adler, always specifically asked for Mashlim, for the last Aliyah of the Torah. Shvi, last Aliyah. He finishes. Acharon, Chaviv. Why? So the Tosfot Yom Tov says the reason why is because during the time of the Gemara, the first person made the bracha, and the last person made the bracha. And therefore the Kohen that was doing the first one made the first bracha, and then the great one would do the last bracha at the end. Right? So therefore it comes out. That's why it's the greatest. Meaning the first one is the greatest and the last one. It's the first, which is the most important. First is the best. Right? But then the last one is the most precious. So he says, but El Yarabah comes and he argues. And he says the reason why is Ma'alim B'Kodesh. We go up in Kiddusha and we don't go down. So that's why since the last one is the last Aliyah, it's the highest in Kiddusha. And therefore that's why we don't go down. Okay? Other Aliyot though, or other halachot, is when you're selling the Aliyot. If they have a minhag to sell the Aliyot, so if you're buying the Aliyot and you're going to come and you're going to be Mechabed Chaverot to go to the Torah, nevertheless, right, they always come and they sell the last Aliyah separately. Why? Because it's a separate, the last Aliyah is the most important. Again, not the Maftir, because the Maftir was added in later on. The last Aliyah is a Mashlim, the Shavi. So he says another halacha nosefet is, it's a sur for a Kohen to go up on the Aliyot other than the first Kohen. Okay, that's according to the Ashkenazim. Mishabra says you could come and you could call him up to the last Aliyah, because since the last Aliyah is the most important of the Aliyot, you're allowed to. Another halacha is, according to the Magen Avraham, in a case where there's a minyan, and there's only one Israel and one Levi, and everybody else are Kohanim. One more time. A minyan full of Kohanim, but there's only one Israel and one Kohen. Yeah? What do? So you should first call the Israel, then call the Levi, and afterwards the Kohanim. Machatzit shekel is the reason why is because the seder of Acharon Chaviv, and therefore in this case the Kohanim should be the Chavivim, right? But Lalacha, the Mishabras Paskins, he says no, read the Kohen, Levi, Israel, and then afterwards all the rest of the Kohanim, and that's what's brought down in the Halacha, that it's a chovat to be makpida. The Talmid Chacham should get the Aliyah Acharona of Vizot HaBeracha, which is called Chatan Mesayem. And we have a minhag that the Oleh Mesayem La Torah is called Chatan Torah, and he makes a seudah for everybody. Why? It's the most important, because Chatan Mesayem is even more important than the Chatan Matchil, the Bereshit, Chatan Bereshit. Nowadays, Chatan Bereshit usually sells for much more because it's Segula for Parnasah. So once it's Segula for Parnasah, so everybody comes, right, and they do it. But that's just the way it is. So basically, again, you have the two different thoughts or schools of thoughts that you do have both of them. You have the first one and the last one that they're going to be the most important. Shabbat Shalom.